Why does God allow bad things in my life? Well, it's a difficult question to tackle. But one thing I think we need to know at the beginning is that God is good, that there's no evil thing in him. In James chapter 1, verse 17, it tells us every good gift and every perfect gift is from above and comes down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow of turning. I think this needs to be established in our hearts, to know that God is love, that God is good. In him there's no evil thing. There's no evil thoughts he has no evil thoughts towards us, but only what is good, what is best for us. He is a God of light, of purity, and of holiness. There's no evil in him. When we know this and when this is accepted in our hearts, then we can understand, well, maybe God has a purpose in things. I think there's two ways we can answer this question. Firstly, we can see that bad things, difficult situations could be a result of our fallen nature and of sin. There's a story in the Bible when David sinned with Bathsheba, and in adultery he had a son, and a consequence of his sin was that God said that this son will not survive and he'll die. And this happened. His child died a few days after his birth. There can be consequences and results of sin. We can't put aside the fact that our fallen nature caused everything in the world to change, caused us to turn away from God, and the consequences to our sin. God's judgment is one consequence of sin. But then there are things, difficult situations, and maybe we could say bad things, but difficult things, let's say rather, that happen in our lives as believers, born-again Christians. Why did these things happen? It tells us in Romans 8, verse 28, God works all things for good to those who love him and are called according to his purposes and according to his plans. That means that somewhere God has his hand on everything that happens in our lives. It could be a difficult situation, a bad thing, but in that, God can work for his glory in our lives. James says at the beginning of his letter, "Count it all joy, brethren, when you fall into various trials and difficulties." God is wanting us to find a joy and a peace somewhere in difficult situations. The story of Joseph in the Old Testament is a wonderful example. At the end of everything that Joseph had been through, being rejected by his brothers, thrown in prison, falsely accused, lived through many difficult things. When his brothers came down to Egypt and repented before him, he revealed himself to his brothers. When his father died, his brothers even were still in fear and trembling that their brother Joseph would turn against them. But Joseph turned to them and says in chapter 50, verse 21, "Now therefore do not be afraid. I will provide for you and your little ones." And he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. And just before that, he had said to them, "But as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good." God can have his purposes and his ways, even in the difficult things and bad things in our life.